stock of the day is Premier Investments. It says profit from continuing operations was steady for the first half, with operations rising slightly to nearly $102 million, despite weaker sales. Total revenue up 3% to nearly $480 million, but sales declined at Smiggle. And Premier will pay a fully franked interim dividend of 45 cents a share, compared with no dividend paid a year ago. So what do our experts think? And David, clearly retail is a very difficult space to be in at the moment, obviously, as you've mentioned, given the rising interest rate environment.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Andrew. It's a difficult environment, and I think it will get more difficult for a lot of the discretionary retailers. And Peter Alexander, which is part of Premier Investments, is very much in that discretionary retail. I think a lot of their market segment would be, the younger, the 20-year-olds and that sort of demographic, who many of them would have impacts from rising interest rates and mortgage repayments or rent going up. So, yeah, it is a tough time for Premier Investments. They've also announced a fairly big restructure of their Smiggle business, which appears to have been suffering. Their sales have been down for a while, and looking at new management in there and looking at refocusing their Smiggle brand and Smiggle business around that 6 to 12 age bracket. I know that it's certainly when my children were that age, it was all the rage. I don't know whether or not it necessarily is now, so it's an opportunity for them to refocus that. But yeah, tough period for discretionary retailers. It's interesting that we've seen the share price of Premier up today. I think investors are looking at their capital management that you mentioned, that they've announced an increased dividend and also a share buyback. So yeah, Premier's in a position where their brands themselves are struggling or will come into some struggle over the next 6 to 12 months, but they have quite a good balance sheet. So I think investors are possibly looking to what they might do with that balance sheet. There's the possibility that they look at some acquisitions in the future, but that's not certain. They also have a fairly large investment in Breville Group as well. So, it's a bit of a conglomerate there. Look, it's one of those stocks, I can't see a reason to be buying it at the moment, other than the fact that the market has beat the share price down so much. So they're actually trading on a PE ratio of 6 times. So they're quite cheap fundamentally, but I just can't see really any momentum that will push them forward over the next few months. So it's probably one that I'd keep on the watch list, see how that Smiggle business turns around, and potentially it might be one that I'd add into the future. But yeah, at this point in time, I'd probably call it an avoid to a hold if you've still got the stock.
An avoid to a hold. Interesting, depending on your
perspective.
Let's go a hold. Yes. All right. Mathan. Now, of course, in the past, Solomon Lew he's had the Midas touch, hasn't he? He needs a bit of that, because certainly over the past 12 months has been a difficult trading environment for them. So how do you see it playing out?
Yeah, he knows how to pull the reins in. It's a tough sector, and it's a tough place to be, but they're really good players. So, you've got to give them credit to that. They have been beaten up. I would probably put them in the top group of retail players out there, and they've actually underperformed everyone else. Everyone loves their JB Hi-Fis, the super retail. This is, they should be in the top 3 or 4. So in that context, they've actually underperformed all of them. And this is actually quite interesting now. I'm supposed to be the last bear standing, but there's someone who's more bearish than me on Premier. God. Look, I think Premier has taken a fair hit. But I agree with David on the context that I don't see a catalyst driving it in the short term. I think the consumer spending is going to struggle. Discretionary spending is going to be the one that gets hit first, and that's going to hurt a lot of them. My daughter actually used to work for Smiggles, so I used to hear all the stories about Smiggles, and it's amazing how much money grandparents are willing to spend on their grandkids. And so that cycle is probably going to slow down, but I don't think the brand is damaged or anything like that. I think it's just an economic cycle. So I think when interest rates are going up, and I think probably RBA is going to hike one more time, so that's probably going to be weigh on them. But eventually that'll come out. I think it's one of those ones where you don't have to rush in. I think it's a solid hold. I'm actually interested in buying it now. If you're holding, say, a JB Hi-Fi or a Super Retail, I think you're better off selling them and buying Premier if you want the same exposure. So I actually think it's been beaten up too much compared to the others. So I suspect the rest are going to get the same treatment. It's a matter of time. So I think it's a solid hold. I'm looking at a catalyst to buy it to go up. So it's a hold for me.
Okay. All right. Yeah, interesting perspective. Solid hold. David, we'll call it a weak hold for you if you like, as you try to work out what to do with it. All right. That is our stock of the day, Premier Investments.